The restaurant glowed with soft golden light, reflecting against polished, wooden tables and tall glass windows that looked out onto the busy evening street. The air carried the rich scent of grilled steak, warm bread and spices, comforting to most, but quietly painful to someone who hadn't eaten all day. In the far corner, near the window, a woman sat stiffly in a booth with her little girl beside her. Her coat was thin and slightly worn, and she kept smoothing it down as if trying to press away her nervousness. Across from them lay a single menu barely opened. She had asked only for water, her voice so soft the waiter almost hadn't heard it. Her eyes kept moving from the door to the floor, to her daughter, never staying still long enough to rest. The little girl, no older than 5, swung her small legs beneath the seat. At first she tried to stay distracted, tracing shapes on the fogged-up window with her finger. But then the smell of food drifting from nearby tables grew stronger. Her movements slowed. Her eyes wandered. That was when they stopped, fixed on a table across the room. A well-dressed man sat there alone, sleeves neatly folded, a watch gleaming under the lights. In front of him was a large plate filled with steak, mashed potatoes glistening with butter, fresh bread and bright green vegetables. Steam curled into the air like a quiet invitation. The little girl didn't speak. She didn't point. She just stared, wide-eyed, silent, swallowing gently as if hoping the scent alone might fill her empty stomach. Her gaze wasn't greedy or bold. It was innocent and longing, the kind of look that slips out before pride has time to stop it. The mother noticed. A shadow of heartbreak crossed her face. She leaned down and whispered something into her daughter's ear, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. Then she reached slowly for her purse. Her movements were careful, almost practiced, the quiet routine of someone who had learned how to leave without being seen. His voice was calm, not loud enough to embarrass her, but clear enough to stop her steps. The woman froze just inches from the restaurant door. Her fingers tightened around her daughter's small hand. For a second, she thought maybe there was a problem. Maybe someone believed they couldn't afford to be there. Maybe the water alone had been too much. Her heart pounded as she slowly turned around. The man was standing now a few steps away from his table. He didn't look angry. He didn't look annoyed. Instead, there was something gentle in his expression, something understanding. "I think," he said carefully, "there's been a small misunderstanding." Color rushed to her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she replied quickly, her voice barely steady. "We were just leaving. We didn't order anything." "I know," he answered softly. "That's the misunderstanding." She blinked, confused. He glanced at his untouched plate and then back at the little girl, who immediately lowered her eyes, suddenly shy. "I ordered far too much," he continued, "and I hate wasting food. Would you help me with it?" The offer hung in the air between them. Pride rose inside her like a wall. She wasn't someone who begged. She had walked in only because her daughter had said she was cold and tired. She had hoped to sit somewhere warm for a few minutes before heading back out. Accepting charity felt heavy, almost unbearable. But then she felt a tiny tug on her hand. She looked down. Her daughter wasn't speaking, but hope shone openly in her eyes, fragile, bright and impossible to ignore. The man sensed her hesitation. He stepped back slightly, giving her space. "Please," he added quietly, "you'd actually be doing me a favor." There was no pity in his tone, no audience watching closely, just kindness offered without conditions. After a long breath, the woman nodded once. They walked back to the table. The man signaled the waiter, who brought an extra plate without asking questions. The little girl climbed onto the seat slowly, as if afraid the moment might disappear. When the first bite touched her lips, her eyes closed briefly, relief washing over her small face. The man looked away politely, pretending to adjust his napkin. By the time the little girl finished eating, the restaurant had grown quieter. The dinner rush was fading, and the warm lights seemed softer now. The tension that had once wrapped around the mother's shoulders had eased, replaced by something gentler. Relief. She folded her napkin carefully and helped her daughter wipe her hands. Her movements slower this time, no longer rushed by embarrassment. The man sat across from them, his own plate nearly untouched. He hadn't minded. Watching the little girl eat with shy gratitude had filled him more than the food ever could. "Thank you," the woman said at last, her voice steady but thick with emotion. She met his eyes properly now, without fear. You didn't have to do that. He gave a small smile. I know. There was a pause, not awkward, but meaningful. He leaned back slightly, as if deciding whether to speak further. Then he did. When I was her age, he began quietly, nodding toward the little girl. My mother and I used to do the same thing. The woman's brow furrowed softly. We would walk into places just to sit somewhere warm, he continued. Sometimes she'd order water. Sometimes nothing at all, and I would pretend I wasn't hungry, even when I was. His fingers traced the edge of the table absent-mindedly. One night, a stranger noticed me staring at his plate. Just like I noticed her. The little girl looked up, listening. He didn't make a big show of it. He didn't make us feel small. He simply invited us to share. My mother cried afterward. Not because we were ashamed, but because someone had seen us. Silence settled over the table again. But this time it felt full of understanding. I never forgot that, he said softly. And I promised myself that if I was ever in a position to help, I would pay attention. Tears shimmered in the woman's eyes, but she didn't look away. She wasn't being pitied. She was being respected. As they stood to leave, the man quietly handed his card to the manager near the counter. His voice was low, private. If they ever come back, he said, please make sure they're taken care of. Outside, the night air was still cold, but it didn't feel as harsh. The little girl waved through the glass window before, disappearing down the sidewalk. With her mother,